As above, so below.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I'm your host, Bernard Beitman. I'm the founder of the Coincidence Project. We're a nonprofit in the state of Virginia. We have a board and we have a little funding, and we need more funding just to keep this going. If you are interested, please go to our website, the Coincidence Project, and help us out, because we love to do the Coincidence Project activities, which include the Coincidence Cafe. And you can get information about the Coincidence Cafe on the website of the Coincidence Project, which is the coincidenceproject.net. And you can register and come every month. It begins at 11 a.m. the third Thursday of each month, third Saturday of each month, for about an hour and a half. And we tell each other coincidence stories, and people get to know each other and see a lot of funny parallels that happen just by coincidence, synchronicity in those meetings. So I've been trying to encourage people to have live coincidence cafes where they get together in their town and talk with each other, that weird kind of thing that we are now getting used to again, of being in person with people. So I called up somebody or texted somebody that I knew had interest in doing a coincidence cafe in Charlottesville, and we had coffee on a Friday, and a couple of days before we had coffee, I got an email from somebody that said a mutual friend said we should meet. And then another person contacted me because of the person who contacted me because of the person who said we should meet. So I had this idea of starting a coincidence cafe in Charlottesville and started it. And a few days later, there were 3 people, really good people involved with coincidences, who really wanted to do something together, to make something happen here in Charlottesville. And it's an example of just starting something, asking somebody for coffee and having an idea, and then watching the dominoes fall into place. So we're going to have a potluck dinner in April and start organizing something here in Charlottesville, the Coincidence Cafe of Charlottesville. And I encourage you to talk with us about doing one in your own hometown. And you get the idea of it by going to the Coincidence Cafe yourself regularly by signing up at the coincidenceproject.net. Our guest today is a lifelong learner who started noticing that serendipitous events occur in her life from an early age. Her name is Autumn Villard, and she is a writer of a book, as you could see. It's The Helpful Universe, and about signs and symbols and synchronicities that can help you lead a more fun life, the life that you want. And it's not a thick book, and it's a lot of stories that are easy to read, and it's really looking at the mind of one person who got tuned into synchronicities and recorded some of them. And what she's done, I encourage each of you to do, is write down your meaningful coincidence stories, and then you get to look back, and I will ask her, just what do you see having written down all these things? She realized, Autumn did, that they could be used for guidance in everyday life, as many people do. Realizing this was not something everyone recognized, she decided to write this handbook of signs and symbols. It gives the readers short, actionable, and easy ways to interact with the universe, she suggests, while enjoying the experience. And it's very important to notice that she said enjoying the experience, because that's part of the fun of this thing, is to be able to enjoy the experience. So, Autumn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, yeah, and it was fun reading your book and reading some of the things that you had in it, and the stories you had in it. But as I mentioned as we began, some of the some of the fun ones you put at the beginning are worth our talking about, because they reflect the idea that what you see around you is also a mirror of your own mind. Your mind is mirrored by your environment, which is a key aspect of meaningful coincidences. So why don't you tell us one of your stories? Maybe not from your book, but I think you've had one with your husband, and we can get into some of the ideas in your book then afterwards.
Of how I met him, or
Yes, how you met him.
okay. Well, I had been living across the country, and I flown back to New Mexico to for a visit. And unfortunately, I had a brother pass away that I was supposed to be meeting. Long story, but then the rest of my siblings came, and we were up in the mountains looking for a resting place for him. And so when we're up in the mountains, when we were coming home, we stopped to get a soda at a convenience store in a little Tent Mountain village up there. And standing in line to pay, I realized the man standing in front of me I'd known since first grade. I'm like, I haven't seen him in 20 years, but I know this person. And he ended up being in town only for a meeting himself, living in another state in the other direction, and had come up to the mountains just for his lunch, for something to do, and happened to be in there buying a soda himself. And we ended up getting married, reconnecting and getting married. So I think it was a coincidence that we were both in, not living there, not, for any other reason. So that was a good coincidence to me. Though.
Well, yeah, that's a good coincidence. That is a good coincidence. Ones we like to keep happening.
Yeah.
And part of the interesting thing that people need to recognize with coincidences is that that you have to do something to make them happen. And
Right.
And there are circumstances that increase the likelihood of coincidences. And the circumstances here was a major life stressor, which was the death of your brother, and having to do something different, that is, find a resting place for him. So you're already open. When that happens, your life gets disorganized. The regular structure that you understand you're running by is changed, and that seems to let more coincidences come in. And you were also at a time in your life where you were ready to meet somebody, which is which I'm guessing was the case. So that makes a bit of a difference as well in this. But then you saw him, and the fact that you recognize someone from 25 years ago who was like in second grade or something, or first grade with you, that's a trick. I mean, we change a bit from when we grow up. How did you know it was him?
Well, we had gone all the way through school together.
Oh, you had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did know him all the way through school.
So you could recognize him. So there he was. And the funny thing for each of you is that you were both available to be in a relationship. And how this happened, I suggest, is a term I use for human GPS or inner GPS, that we get to where we need to be without knowing how we got there. Now, you kind of knew why you were there for your brother, but he didn't have anything to do. So he wanted to spend some time. So why not spend some time to go see Autumn again without his knowing consciously that he was doing it? But I mean, she's in the area, and I think people can pick that up. So I think, and I know where she is right now, and I think I'll go over there, and maybe we'll run into each other. Now, that isn't the conscious part of it, but I think we have the capacity subconsciously, intuitively, to do just that. What do you think of that?
I absolutely believe that. it was, I'd say meant to be, but it was, because I wouldn't have been in town still, you know, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have been in that mountains. You know, everything had to fall into place, and you have to let it fall into place and be open and not try and force it, because ours isn't the how, it's the what. So how something happens isn't our control. The universe will conspire to make it happen for us.
This is where I'm not gonna recognize how you think about this, and it's part of my job. It almost seems in this to say, no, we have more to do with these things than we want to recognize.
That could be.
Well, I'm glad you're open to the possibility that it could be, because it is to me. And what I do with this is as I run into what you're saying here, the universe does it, and I'm just part of it. That's a lot of the way people think about it, and that's how people think about it. And I tend to be more of a yes, there's some mystery going on. There is mystery in all of this. There is mystery in all of this. But there's also you. There's also the guy who became your husband. And
True.
I think there's something each of us has to do, even though we don't know how to do it. You can say the universe guided him to you, or you were guided to him. And I'm saying, well, yeah, you definitely got some help, but you also had to follow your own intuition to do it. And this is a hard thing to prove right now, but this is a difference of opinion that I will continue to run into, and I'm not going to try to convince you any differently. I'm just trying to say this is how I've taken it in this human GPS. Animals have this human GPS. People show up at the right time at the right place on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
And you can always say the universe or God or something did it, but we have some ability to decide ourselves, and I think that's an important part of it.
Absolutely.
So tell us how you got started writing this book. We kind of talked about it at the beginning, and then we can go into some of your stories, because you've got some good ones.
Oh, thanks.
Again, it's The Helpful Universe by Autumn Villard.
Thank you. I have pretty much done this my whole life. And of course, back when we were young, there wasn't a lot of information out about anything. There's a lot more available for people now. But over the years, I've had just a lot of people asking, oh, how do I do this? Or how do you do that? Or why do you know about this? And so that's what got me started. I'm thinking I should be writing all of this down. And I wanted it to be easy to do so people didn't get frustrated, especially if they're not very versed in the modalities. This would just give you a quick, brief introduction to what something is, and easy, like I said, actionable items that you can practice every day, and you can flip through and choose something that interests you and follow that for a while and find something else. Because not every way to do something is going to resonate with every person, but something will click.
Yeah. And as I think about the future of this coincidence business, I think of courses and classes, and for people who are maybe a little interested but don't want to read too much detail, like my book has a lot of stuff in it, and it may not be a good introduction for a lot of people. If you just want to see a bunch of stories by one person describing her life, going through her environment and seeing stuff happen and going, what? Okay, I think I'll write this one down. And you get to have a collection. And she divides them up into various general categories. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite parts is license plates. and cars and traffic. I mean, and then numbers and colors, and weather, ocean, plants and animals, and business cards and tarot cards and meditation and electronics. There's a lot of like regular daily life. This is a woman who just lives life, but is a kind of anthropologist in her own life, describing the stuff that happens. Where do you live, Oda?
In New Mexico, southern New Mexico.
Southern New Mexico.
Yeah.
And you got some desert and some mountains hanging around where you are.
Correct.
And,
right at the base of some mountains.
Right at the base of some mountains. Sometimes the geography makes a difference in the kinds of experiences people have. So I just wanted to be able to localize you in three-dimensional space, because actually your what you write about is in your space. This is the stuff that's happening in your space, and you describe it. So why don't you start with one or two of your license plate stories with the basic idea. What's the basic idea of your license plate stories?
The basic idea is to pay attention to license plates, because there's a lot of personalized license plates out. And actually in New Mexico, there's a lot less than in other states I've noticed. For instance, Arizona has a ton of personalized plates. And we have them here, but not as much. So I guess that's why they started standing out to me more. I didn't see them as regularly. So I would start looking for them and decide, okay, that's going to be my message for the day, the first one I see. It's kind of like a little oracle or something. And they're funny. They can really amuse you, you know. The one I saw the other day said, "I see you too." And I said, okay, the universe is telling me it sees me too, you know. So that's the way I look at it. So I'm not alone. I'm
well, I mean, this is a little bit like stand-up comedy to me. What you've done here. So I if you have your book there, I would like to be able to have you just tell us a couple of your stories.
okay.
Some of the ones that you really like.
I think the bad hair day one was a good one. But my favorite would be when my husband was so ill and we were at the Mayo Clinic getting tests and we didn't know what was going to happen. And his mother had passed away a couple years prior to that. And she drove a white Jeep. And in the license, going out of the Mayo Clinic, we saw a white Jeep in front of us, and the license plate said Sue Mom, and his mother's name was Sue. So definitely, I'm like, your mom is here with us. She knows what's going on. And that was like a reassurance that things were going to be okay, we thought. So that was a real powerful one for me to see, for him as well, because it was on the exact same kind of car that she drove, same color, same kind of car. Her name and mom. Like, if we didn't know it was his mom, she had to put the word mom there too to make sure we knew that. So I thought that was one of my most big, powerful ones that stand out to me, was the Sue Mom. But the one I put in the book was, one of the ones was bad hair. When I walked out of the house with my hair going every direction, looking like I just didn't comb it, and then I see the bad HARE on a it was on a car. Anyway, I saw that and realized, oh, maybe I should comb it before I go inside somewhere. Because I looked in the mirror and said, oh dear. So I see ones like that all the time, or like one that'll say calm down or be grateful, and it will remind me, okay, things aren't as dire as we think they are. Take a breath. You can do this. So they seem to meet whatever I'm thinking at the moment. Like you said, it reflects back. So if I'm in a stressful situation, I will get one that seems to say calm down or something. And if I'm needing, I don't know, some sort of direction, it seems to have something that will point towards. And I see mostly positive, I see lots of ones that say illuminate or lighten up or like that. And they also will reflect what you're thinking, like I mentioned about travel. So if I'm thinking, where do I want to go next? I'll see one that may say something about Idaho or West Virginia on the plate. And oh, okay, well, maybe I should look into that area. So I will just take them as little hints for the day. And I don't every day here, we don't see one every single day here, but sometimes I'll see 3 in a day. Sometimes it'll be a string of 3 days in a row. I'll see them and add them together. For instance, if I gave the example of if you're thinking about somebody and you see like Playboy license plates and bad boy license plates, and ones that say things like this, you're like, maybe I shouldn't be dating that person, or maybe I need to look at this a little more closely. So that's how I approach the license plates.
Well, I think these are really good stories that you're telling our audience, because I want them to be able to see how you think about them, and that's why the value of your telling us the stories. So, what about numbers and symbols and colors and stuff?
Numbers, I know there's a lot recently about certain numbers, and I think everybody has certain numbers that come into their life on a regular basis. I know in your book you had talked about the 111 and the 1111. My numbers seem to be like 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. I get that a lot. And so I think for instance, in my book where I talk about if a number repeatedly comes up, and for instance, going to a doctor and you've had the number 9 all day long coming up, and then the doctor that you go to see is in the number 9 office. To me, I relax then, because I'm like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm supposed to be, because the 9s have been here all day long and it's continuing. So I'm on the right path. I think of a lot of them as a path, just kind of saying, okay, you don't need to do any course direction. You're good here.
That is probably the most common use of synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, is a confirmation that you're on the right path. It's somehow we need that. We need to be able to feel almost like a parent saying we're doing the right thing, or a teacher like we're doing the right thing. Like, okay, keep doing it. We're still children, even though we've got grown-up pants on. It's still like we want to feel like maybe somebody is watching around us and encouraging us. And the simple way to do that is to say, with symbols of all kinds, you're on the right path. So you use numbers, as you just described, the 9, and other people do that as well. The 1111 one is used by a lot of people that way. 9s are not uncommon in that way, but people have different numbers. But reassurance, you're on the right path. Hear that pretty regularly. What about colors?
Colors are very important in our world, even if we see them differently. For instance, my husband and I seems to see undertones. So if we're both looking at something gray, I perceive it as gray, but he perceives it as the undertones, whether it's blue or green or whatever. But we still have our associations with whatever color we think we're seeing. And color therapy is very common. They use certain colors to paint hospitals and prisons because they know that will be calming, or whatever the choice is for primary school cafeteria, not too excited. And we wear what we feel good in. And for instance, if we're out shopping and we buy something in a color that's not currently something we have in our closet, or not a color we normally wear, that means that's something we need in that color. I feel, maybe you bought a bright flowered top that you never wear bright flowers. And you're like, why did I buy that? Well, maybe you needed some energy that day or something. Maybe you needed to be pepped up. So I think color is important in that too. Whether you surround yourself with colors that make you happy or calm you down. And people perceive you by the colors too. You know, you'll, as in my book, you'll be perceived very differently, energetically, depending on if you're wearing really dark colors to tone things down or bright colors to liven things up. A red means certain, you know, whatever color you're wearing is going to project something different. So soft colors, bright colors. And I don't think a lot of people really pay too much attention to the energy around a color. And I think everything is energy. So we have to think about what, you know, what we want out of our day when we get dressed, I guess. And even if you choose to wear the same color all of the time, you can wear it differently. Different fabrics, different cuts, different whatever. So I'm very, very aware of my environment, I guess I would say, as to what color can do.
In a related way, a friend of mine and I went shopping in secondhand stores for me to wear something different while I'm doing the show, because I tend to wear black, just a black thing. I mean, it comes across okay, but I was trying to get a little bit more dressed up. But I get into a habit of doing what I'm wearing now. But one of the things we bought was a kind of brown velour kind of sweatery thing. Was a sweater, a pullover thing, and it's from the 1980s. And my son was talking about whose odor is still in that. But there's something about and I got another shirt that is kind of a Madras kind of design from the 80s, and then I see a patient of mine wearing a similar shirt, but he just bought it. It's kind of that design was coming back. So it just helped me interpret at least the velour brown and what it might mean to me, because I don't have the way of thinking about it that you do.
I would think that maybe you were wanting a softer look for coming across, maybe not so structured or distant. Maybe you were thinking you wanted something that would be softer to connect more. And maybe brown was a little softer color than black. You weren't ready to go to baby pink, but brown's okay. You know, you weren't going to make that big of a leap, but that's what I would think. And then with the velour, it's like, I want something softer, and brown is kind of a warm, cozy type color. So I would think that it was you were trying to get something to look a little softer and more connecting.
Good. I think I'm gonna wear that and see how it looks on this thing. But I think that's true. And really, what you're picking up indirectly is that I've been through a lot of podcasts where I've been the guest as well as doing my own. So about 70 or 80 other podcasts promoting my book, Meaningful Coincidences, back there. And I think I've come to the end, not the end, but a down period where I've done enough of that, and I will continue to do more of it. But I want to be much more relaxed about it, rather than like buy my book kind of thing, which is kind of the way that was driven. And the brown velour is a very nice a way of saying what I'm even doing today, because I'm feeling more relaxed today about it all. And you're helping, but and I think the idea of saying, okay, I've done what I can, and now I'm just going to be able to just do what comes up rather than trying to be more aggressive about it. So I think that's a very nice comment. And what about the Madras shirt?
Madras, I would say you were trying to connect more with the fun, lighthearted side of things, because that's how I would view a Madras shirt. So when I would pick up on, I thought, well, maybe he's just trying to lighten things up a little bit and be a little more playful or fun, you know, not so serious and heavy.
I am so serious. I am so serious. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to get this book out and make the world different. We're thinking about synchronicity and coincidences. Yeah, I think it's time to give that up. I can do it. I can be serious about it without having to be so serious about it. That's what the madras might reflect. And I appreciate your comments, because what I'm trying to show our audience is how you can see meaning in these everyday life things, and that's what autumn is bringing to us. It's there's the big ones like how you met your husband and the life-changing ones, but there are just kind of these everyday things that your mind is reflected in your environment, and pay attention to them. Maybe you'll figure out something the way Autumn just helped me figure out something.
And it doesn't cost any money. That's something else I wanted to get across. You don't have to go to Tibet and study for a year. You know, you can, everyday surroundings will give you the answers or the confirmation or whatever you need. You know, you
I don't know
observe
where
the traffic.
I don't know where you grew up, but I grew up in upper lower class or lower middle class. I don't know which one it
Me
was.
too, same place.
Same place. And we didn't have that much money, so you had to make up stuff. And why pay for it when you can figure it out yourself? And that's I really love this message of yours. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to pay a guru to tell you how to do it. You can just look around you, and you can get a lot of good information to help you. And that's probably your main message, isn't it?
I believe so, because I want everybody to have the fun that I have looking around and seeing things. It's incredible, you know. It's amazing how things work.
It's amazing how things work.
It is. I have a string, like a 3-part one that I didn't have in the book. And it was funny because a few years ago we were out of town, and I was watching a rerun of a show on TV, and they mentioned the character said, "Oh, I love Leslie Nielsen." She said, "Oh, it's his work." Let me see. I can't remember the name of it. In the movie, where did I put this? Oh, sorry. Oh, here we go. In Forbidden Planet, Leslie Nielsen in the movie Forbidden Planet. It was a rerun of Castle. And I was like, okay, you know, she just mentions that at the end of it. Didn't mean anything. The second part of that was actually 2 days earlier, I'd been watching Antiques Roadshow randomly in the hotel, and they had a little 1950s toy or whatever it was called Robbie Robot. Okay, didn't mean anything either. But the third part connected the two, because we went out to eat again in a town we didn't live in, and there was a framed poster right next to our booth of Leslie Nielsen in Forbidden Planet introducing Robbie Robot. And so I didn't know they went together till I saw the poster. So things like that happen, and to me it's just such a joy. It's so fun to have them.
Yeah, those are I don't know, people want to call them cosmic jokes, but they're just part of the fun of living life when you pay attention the way you just did. And you get a laugh, and you don't have to go to a comedy show to be able to get a laugh out of it. You just have to pay attention to the funny things that are happening in your life. It's one of those variations on the themes is people drawing trees and doing a lot of nature scenes and having nature scenes around their house. Just go out there. Just go out there. It's there. I mean, it's beautiful out there. The trees have got more energy than the paintings do, and you can be surrounded by them. And For me, they like listening to me sing. So I got to be able to have an audience, and there's nobody making a big deal about it because I can do all the songs they want and I want. I mean, it's you can have an interaction with what would be called a museum someplace else, but you can interact with them in a live, ongoing way, and you're just doing that. It's just they can be a lot of fun, these things.
They answer random non-important questions too, which like immediately I get answers, which crack me up. And like I was reading, okay, I went to the thrift store and bought a bunch of books, and I read all kinds of different things. Well, I was flipping through and started reading one of Janet Ivanovich's books, and she mentions let's see, a pneumothorax. I have a tension pneumothorax. Well, I had no idea what that was, but I kept reading. I'm like, I'll look it up at some point. Well, a couple hours later, I'm flipping through one of the other books by Joseph Finder, a completely different type of author. And he describes it in there. I flipped to the page and he's like, the ER doc told me I developed a tension pneumothorax and described what it was. These books were published years apart by completely different authors, but the answer to my kind of wondering what that was answered within hours without me looking it up. So things like that are fun to me, because the same to me and kind of a random tension pneumothorax isn't a common thing to mention in a book, yet the two books within hours of each other both had it in there. And I read the one first that I didn't know what it was, and the second one told me exactly what that meant.
And hey, I want you to comment on my mind here for a minute, because I like the way yours works. It's a lot easier than dealing with what I've got to deal with. So I did a survey, and having a question and having it answered by a media somehow is not as one of the more common coincidences. Thinking about it, and there you get an answer from someplace else. Well, that's I have to put these in categories, and I'll tell you a story simply of a woman who's reading a book she found in a bookstore, and it says in the book, burning lungs is a symptom of a heart attack. Now, that's not a usual symptom of a heart attack. And then she gets off the plane. She's visiting her father, and he starts saying, my lungs feel like they're burning. So she insisted he go to the emergency room, and one of his major arteries in his heart was clogged up, and he probably wouldn't have made it back home an hour away. So it's like what you just said. You read it, and then you see it. It's a little different. It was life-saving. But the general principle is very similar. You think of it, and then it happens out there in some other form. And now, see, I think I could say that I overthink things, but I don't think so. I think I just make categories out of stuff. But would you have some sympathy for me, please, for a moment?
Of course.
Thank you. And express the sympathy. I'd like to hear what you just heard me, what this thing does versus what yours does.
Well, since you study coincidence with your background is why I think you categorize it, because you've been trained to try to recognize symptoms and give the right, I don't want to say diagnosis, the right treatment path for certain issues or symptoms. And so I think that's what you're doing in this. You're just, all your years of training are saying, okay, well, we have this cluster of symptoms, so we need to categorize it into this way. And if they're these go in this, yeah, I think it's just how your mind works. Men are more linear thinking. I'm just kind of
yeah,
and so you're like, okay, it's here, so it goes here. It's here, yeah. So it goes here.
I do have some of the intuitive all over the place capacities, because they need to be ranked together. But the more I'm doing this talking about coincidences with people, the more it's getting to look like I'm doing what you're doing, that that I categorize things partly because that's what I learned to do, even though I didn't like categorizing things, particularly in psychiatry. It was useful to talk about anxiety and different types of anxiety disorders, different versions of depression and bipolar disorder, which are the more common ones, and then OCD and the variations in schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So I'm getting to see
you
what
certainly would treat somebody with depression symptoms the same you would treat somebody with whatever else problems. They're very different. So you would go about it, categorizing them differently and say, okay, this kind of fits over here. So, but it's useful in this too. That's how I had trouble trying to figure out categories for trying to put them in broad categories. And I'm like, well, it could go here, it could fit here and here and here. So which one does it fit into mostly, I guess?
Yeah, there are overlaps, and the categories are useful at least in the way, and to remember them, to remember the coincidences, have these kinds. And you've made categories just based on the particular inputs, like license plates and colors and numbers, and you've gone to the basic way of categorizing, which is by what the thing is. I categorize by process because it's not just one thing. It does that one thing can be involved in a bunch of different processes. So that's why I would say you read about it read about it one place and you saw it another place. You put the Robbie and the actor together in your mind, and then you saw the thing come together. I look at the process that's the same, not necessarily the content that's the same.
And that's probably because the way you think and the processes are what intrigue you. The process of how something occurs is probably why it led you into the field that you were in, because it was interesting to you. Sorry, to see how things work, you know.
It's to see how things work. And you're saying this. This is a I think I'm at a bit of a turning point in all this coincidence business, because I'm seeing much more clearly how people think differently about them. I had a little conference yesterday where 6 different people thought about it in different ways as you do, and being able to categorize not just the kinds of coincidences people experience, which I have in my book, different kinds of coinciders, I call them, but the way they filter inputs. Here it is, Autumn in New Mexico, watching and connecting what she sees. That's what you do. And then finding what they might mean right there to you right then. It's very basic. It's the kind of thinking that I can do, have done, and will continue to do, but then I elaborate on them to make the categories. But I'm just seeing that I do categories and I do process. And that's what I do, but that's not what you do. And that's not what many other people do. And is this valuable or somehow? Well, I don't know. I'd like to think all these years of schooling do make a difference somehow in making things better, but we'll find out.
You need all of the input to get a whole picture. I think of like Aesop's fables, where the men were all blind, touching a different part of the elephant. And so one describes the trunk and says that's what an elephant looks like, and one describes a foot, one describes the tail. Well, they're all right, but they aren't seeing the whole picture.
And what I think I'm doing is seeing the whole picture, and that's
helping us connect.
Pardon me?
Using the whole overview is pulling it all together for all of us.
Yeah, that's what it looks like I'm doing. It's and just the way you did it up there. This is the elephant, and this is where I am. But this has also been a role in my life, is to be an observer from a distance, as I did growing up in my family. I was like outside. My brother was an only child, was the kind of thing I used to say. He was in his own family, and I was outside of it. And that's the kind of place I'm in. So I'm now defining more clearly how I think in regard to coincidences, and not getting caught up in thinking everybody should think this way, because they shouldn't and don't and can't. But maybe this is an input that can help different people. So that's you've just done a big service for me in helping me clarify three things: process, categories, and observer from a distance. And those are three elements that are key to the way my mind works. So I thank you for that, Autumn. So let's there's some good questions that you gave me to possibly ask you. How would someone who has never experienced or believed in signs and synchronicities begin?
I think that's why my book is good for that. They can begin anywhere, one. And two, if you've never believed in it or trusted it or noticed them, start with something small. Just start with a question. Think of a question or a small issue you're having, or if you want direction, like, okay, what do I want to eat for lunch today? Something non-important, really. And then just read the signs around you. Maybe you'll see billboards for a Thai restaurant and a license plate that says Taiwan on or something like that. You'll find, and the billboard could have been there for months, but you never saw it before. But the day you're wondering what to eat, it comes into your play. You see it. So that's where I would start, is just look for signs and ask a small question. Be clear on your question or your want, your desire, like, what should I have for lunch today? And then see what pops in. And then part of it is being willing to try new things. Go somewhere you haven't gone. Drive a route you haven't driven. Eat somewhere you haven't eaten. Try new food. So that's where I would say to begin, and just start. Also note things down. If you don't write it down, you won't remember it. You think you will, but you won't.
You won't, because they're like dreams. They're easily forgotten because they don't fit into the regular categories that we have in life. And part of my reason to do categories is to be able to help people organize their memories of coincidences. But what if somebody says, Autumn, you're an interesting person, you got some good stories, but why should I do this? Why should I pay attention to these signs that you're talking about?
Because they can help you clarify where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. If you're vacillating on, I don't know, should I look for a new job? I don't know. Should I move? Should I? And maybe way back here you already know, but you just kind of need some extra guidance. Or I think they will help you in all kinds of situations. And almost like a listening ear sometimes, you know. Even with the stoplights, where I say that if you're hitting every red stoplight on every block, you know how frustrating that can be. You're like, oh, I can't get through all this traffic. But maybe you should stop and think, why am I being stopped? What is stopping me at every corner? Why am I continually running into all these stops? You know, one after another. No yellow lights, no green lights, only red. So what is stopping you? So I think literally a lot of times, and okay, what is stopping you? Why do you keep stopping along the way? Why are you stopping? You can look at it from different ways, trying to figure out, okay, this isn't normal. Most times you'll hit a variety of lights, some red, some yellow, some green. Or if they're all green, it's like, okay, we're smooth sailing on in to work or wherever we're going. So I think people should pay attention. Who wants to go through life with blinders on, not knowing anything about themselves?
A lot of people. So it ends up being curious. It ends up starting with being curious about yourself.
And I'm very curious about everything. So yes.
The word curious is fundamental to all of this. If you're not curious about you, about your relationship to your environment, what the environment's going on with you, then it's not gonna happen. You're not going to be interested in looking for help outside. You're only going to be looking to experts or friends or somebody to tell you what to do, rather than maybe also looking at the nonverbal hints that are going on around you. You got to be curious. What helps to be curious is to be needy. So a lot of times you can see more coincidences when you're needy. When I got to have some help. So looking around and seeing where the help might be.
Well, that actually dovetails into being religious and praying. A lot of times people don't pray till they're in a desperate situation, like, please get me out of this. So it's kind of the same, you know. You're like, okay, I got to find something to let me know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. What about the question, is everything a sign?
I think so. I really do. And I think you can have the signs wherever you live and whatever environment you're in. And the ancient shamans look for signs and sticks and stones and whatever they had at their disposal, feathers. So we can do the same. No matter how small or large your world is, you can find meaning in it. You can watch the weather. The weather's always changing. And the plants.
And the birds.
So yes, I think everything is. Yeah, the birds. What wildlife crosses your path? Your path.
Yeah, when I talked to my therapist outside the other day on the phone, I heard this bird making a sound that I'd never heard from a bird before. Just kind of like that. What? Hey.
I don't know what that would be.
Well,
foghorn.
I don't know. It didn't matter to me what the bird was so much as what the sound at that moment was trying to say to me, and to this conversation. I didn't come up with it, but this trouble that I'm having being scientific and academic is kind of crowding me away from thinking in the way that I used to think more of, which is there's all this meaning around us. I have to be selective about what I'm going to pay attention to look for meaning. Don't you? Or don't you?
It depends. I think every day it can vary. I think your mind will just kind of light on what needs to be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so today maybe birds aren't in the forefront what I need to be noticing. Maybe it's something else. But that day you needed that sound. To me, that's like some kind of alert sound, warning sound, notice me sound, you know, that loud, reminds you of like a fire drill alarm or something, boat noise or something, kind of like, here we are, the train's crossing the tracks or something like that. So if it's out of the ordinary enough for you to notice it, it'll get your attention however it needs to. So
Did I go to high school with you? I mean, it's the way you think. I mean, I went to some fancy schools like Yale and Stanford and stuff, and wrote a lot of papers academically. But the way you think is like from my neighborhood, growing up with the row houses and the playground down the street. It's like, hey, who wants to play today? Anybody got a bat? Who's got a ball? You know, kind of thing. It's like I really love the way you're thinking about all this. It's so practical. It's so right there, and it's so, to me, reasonable. So I really appreciate getting to know your mind. I've talked to a lot of really smart people on this show.
Oh, I know you have. I'm a good company.
And this is so much easier. This is so much easier. How do you recognize when something has meaning, Autumn?
To me, if it stands out and it's out of the ordinary, not out of the ordinary as in I've never seen a purple cow out of the ordinary, but as in like, why am I noticing this out of the ordinary? Like, for instance, when I said the license plates, or you see the billboard, or there's a purple envelope in your mailbox, anything that's not that you're not noticing all the time. And it can be something you've walked past a photograph or something a million times, but this is the first time you looked at who signed it or whatever. So whatever catches your attention. And so that's why you have to pay attention.
You have to have your attention has to be floating around enough as well as be solid enough so that you can loosen it from what I'm concentrating on now, like having to do this, like driving maybe or talking to somebody, but you're also able to be flexible to move away from what you're paying attention to right now in regular reality, be able to see it. When you're driving a car, you got to do pay attention to the road, but you can see stuff. So what would you think today if you were driving along and you saw a license plate that says thought on it?
I would first go to, okay, what am I thinking about? Why is it important? But what am I thinking about that is important to be thinking about at this point? There's something I should be giving more thought to that I'm not. So I go through like a little checklist in my mind. What resonates? Why am I thinking about thinking? You know, thought. Who put thought into this? You know, I run through a whole thing going, okay, what is it? What should I be thinking? What am I thinking about?
The phrase I got from what you're saying in all different ways, is this suggests that I should think about my thinking.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, and the license plate, that license plate is on my car.
Oh, and so you do have one of the personalized ones, thought.
I do. And what does it mean to you that I have that license plate on my car?
That thought is important to you.
That thinking about thought is important to me.
Thinking is about thought. Yeah, the thought processes, all of it is what interests me.
That's I didn't get to that, but until now. But yes, and talking with you, the three things that I do that maybe are somewhat out of the ordinary is do a lot of thinking about thought, and that means about coincidences. And I think about the processes of coincidences, and I think about the categories of coincidences. And both of them are thinking about thinking things, or thinking about ideas or actions, thinking about. So I'm doing this triangle thing now that goes from here to here, and these connect up. The processes connect up to the categories. How do the categories move?
You've got your work cut out for you.
I've been doing it. I mean, the work cut out for me is now I'm seeing what I'm doing better as a result of this.
It's clarifying and solidifying.
Yeah, and also maybe I can like put it away a little bit too, because it's kind of like sometimes enough is enough. What about invisibility and time warps, Autumn?
Those are fun. And I put that story in there about Marilyn Monroe because it's a famous, well-documented instance.
So tell us the story. Tell us the story.
She was being an interviewer from I think it was New York Times Magazine, I can't remember, was interviewing her in a park, and he was like, do you want to go somewhere private so you don't get mobbed and run over? And she's like, no, nobody will recognize me. And he was like, sure enough, they walked along, nobody bothered them, they talked. And then she said, do you want me to put it on? And he's like, sure. And just her demeanor changes, and all of a sudden she's Marilyn Monroe, and people are like, oh, all over her. So I think so it's not literal invisibility, but it is in a way, because you just pull your energy in enough that you aren't broadcasting who you are to people, and they don't notice you. And I think you can make yourself more self-contained and pull yourself in when you don't want to be noticed. And another example I gave was, you know, the coworker that's always stopping by to your cubicle or desk and talking when you have work to do. And you don't want to be rude, but you don't have time to be talking. Pull yourself in and let them walk right by and talk to somebody else. So I think that's what I mean when I say invisibility, is pulling your energy in enough and dampening it enough so that people aren't noticing you. And then
Good.
the like time warp is when something is an anachronism out of place. And for instance, I gave the example of the man with the whip and the leather suit standing out in front of a building, and which was very out of place on a 100+ degree day, dressed all in black leather with a whip. It was very strange to see that. So I'm like, okay, that's like an anachronism. People haven't used bull whips in a, in a while. It's like a time warp kind of thing. He kind of looked like he was from a different era. So you just got to think, okay, what do I got to crack the whip on? What do I have to, what do I need to be focusing on? So everything to me, you just need to think about and notice.
Well, time warps have just happened to us. We've come to about the end of our interview. We're warping with warp speed, really. This went pretty fast. And to be able to hear a lower middle class girl, now grown up, talking about how she just uses the world as a playground for herself to like figure out what to do and where to go and how to think and how to have some fun is such a delight. Such a delight. I'm glad my colleague found your book somehow, and got you on Facebook to respond after a while so that we were able to get together. And I do hope you'll come to the Coincidence Cafe, and I think you will, because there are more people who I think will very much benefit from hearing you and talking with you, and you'll have a good time. I'm almost sure of it. And you'll see lots of little signs, because a lot of stuff happens in these things. And it'll be curious to see what Autumn comes up with. Now, what's with the meaning of the name Autumn?
It's from an old Peter, Paul, and Mary song called Autumn to May. My older siblings were flower children. And that's where the name came from. And I was born in the autumn, so that's that.
The autumn leaves drift by my window. The autumn leaves of green and gold. Yes. So, Autumn, thank you very much for being with me. And is there one other thing you'd like to be able to tell our audience before we go?
Mainly to have fun with it. Just, life doesn't have to be 100% serious. And to have fun and just start noticing what's going on around you.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.